Marissa Cole was 28 years old, 5'4", and 97 pounds the morning her boss found the saltine crackers in her desk drawer, not a sleeve of them tucked beside a stapler like a forgotten snack. 43 individually wrapped packets, the kind you take two at a time from the basket at a soup kitchen or pocket from the condiment station at a fast food restaurant when no one is watching. 43 packets arranged in neat rows inside the bottom drawer of a desk where she had worked for 11 months without missing a single day. Her boss expected to find a missing invoice. What he found instead was the architecture of a woman keeping herself alive on almost nothing, and it broke something open in him that would take months to understand. But to know why those crackers were there, to understand how a woman with a full-time job and a 4-year-old daughter could be starving in plain sight in a modern American office building, you have to go back. You have to go back to a town called Ridgely in the western panhandle of West Virginia, where the Potomac runs shallow over flat rocks and the hills close in on both sides like cupped hands, and where Marissa Ann Cole was born on a Tuesday in March to a mother who was already tired. Linda Cole worked the overnight shift at a packaging plant 40 minutes outside of town, driving a 1998 Dodge Neon with a cracked windshield and a heater that only worked on the driver's side. She was a quiet woman, not unkind, but hollowed out by the particular exhaustion of doing everything alone. Marissa's father had left before she turned 2, not dramatically, not with a fight or a slammed door, but with the slow evaporation of someone who simply stopped coming home. First, he missed dinners, then weekends. Then he was a phone call every other Thursday that became every other month, that became a birthday card with no return address, that became nothing at all. Linda never spoke badly about him. She never spoke about him at all. His name was Kevin, and by the time Marissa was old enough to ask about him, her mother had perfected the art of changing the subject with such quiet efficiency that the question itself felt rude. Marissa grew up in a rented duplex on Walnut Street, with wood paneling in every room and a backyard the size of a parking space. The carpet was orange, not intentionally, not as a design choice, but the faded remnant of what had probably been red in 1974. She shared a wall with the Hendersons, who had 4 kids under the age of 10, and the noise that came through that wall was the soundtrack of her childhood. Crying, laughing, the dull thump of something being thrown, the tinny sound of a television tuned too loud. Linda kept their side quiet. She kept everything quiet. The house was clean but bare. There were no photographs on the walls, no decorative pillows on the couch, no magnets on the refrigerator. It was the home of someone who had stopped believing that where she lived mattered, who was saving all her energy for the simple act of showing up. But Marissa was different. Marissa was the kind of child who noticed things. The way light moved across the kitchen floor in the afternoon, the particular blue of the sky in October, the sound the wind made when it came through the gap under the front door. She collected things. Rocks from the creek bed, feathers from the yard, buttons she found on the sidewalk. She lined them up on her windowsill and gave them names and stories, and Linda would stand in the doorway of her daughter's room sometimes and watch her arranging her tiny museum with a tenderness that she could not bring herself to say out loud. She loved Marissa the way people love the one good thing they have left, fiercely, silently, with a terror of losing it that lived behind every ordinary moment. School was where Marissa discovered she was smart. Not gifted program smart, not celebrated smart, but quietly, stubbornly intelligent in the way that teachers notice, but rarely reward. She read above her grade level by the time she was 8. She did her homework at the kitchen table every night, while Linda slept before her shift. The house silent, except for the scratch of pencil on paper. She made the honor roll every semester from 4th grade through her junior year of high school, and no one came to a single awards assembly. Not because Linda didn't care, but because Linda was either working or sleeping or driving to work or driving home from work, and the machinery of survival left no room for ceremony. Marissa learned early that achievement without an audience is still achievement. She also learned that it is lonelier than anyone tells you. She had friends, but not close ones. The girls in Ridgely sorted themselves by what their families had, and the Cole family had nothing to sort. Marissa wore clothes from the donation bin at the Methodist church, not the trendy thrift store finds that would become fashionable a decade later, but ill-fitting jeans and sweatshirts with logos for companies she'd never heard of. She smelled like the generic detergent her mother bought in bulk from the dollar store, and she carried her books in a backpack with a broken zipper that she held shut with a binder clip. These are small things. They are small things that feel enormous when you are 14. By her junior year, something shifted. Linda's cough, the one she'd had for as long as Marissa could remember, got worse. It went from a dry bark in the morning to something wet and persistent that woke Marissa through the wall at night. Linda said it was nothing. Linda said it was allergies, then a cold, then the dust at the plant, then nothing again. She refused to see a doctor because seeing a doctor cost money they didn't have and time she couldn't miss. So the cough grew, and Linda shrank inside it, losing weight she didn't have to lose. Her face going pale and angular, the skin under her eyes turning the color of a bruise. Marissa was 16 when she came home from school on a Wednesday in November and found her mother on the kitchen floor, not unconscious. Linda was sitting upright, her back against the cabinet beneath the sink, a dish towel pressed to her mouth, and the dish towel was red. Not slightly pink, not spotted, red. The kind of red that means something is very wrong inside. Marissa stood in the doorway of the kitchen for 7 seconds. She counted them later, the way you count things when your brain is trying to process something it doesn't want to accept. 7 seconds of her mother looking up at her with eyes that held an apology instead of fear, and then Marissa called 911 from the phone on the wall, the same phone her mother used to call in sick on the mornings she couldn't stop shaking. The diagnosis was stage 3 lung cancer. Linda had never smoked a cigarette in her life, but she had spent 14 years breathing the air inside a packaging plant with ventilation systems that hadn't been updated since the building was constructed in 1967. The doctor at the county hospital explained it with the practiced gentleness of someone who delivers this news too often. Occupational exposure, IT he called it, the particulate matter, the adhesives, the chemical solvents used in the laminating process. He said it in a way that made it sound clinical and contained, but what he was really saying was that Linda Cole's job had killed her, slowly, invisibly, while she was busy trying to keep her daughter fed. The next 5 months were a descent. Linda tried 1 round of chemotherapy, paid for by Medicaid after a 6-week application process that Marissa completed herself, filling out forms at the kitchen table the same way she used to do homework. The chemo made Linda sicker than the cancer did. She vomited for days. She lost her hair in clumps that Marissa found in the shower drain and on the pillow, and once, horribly, in the scrambled eggs she'd made for dinner and hadn't realized until she sat down. Linda stopped the treatment after 1 round. She didn't discuss it. She simply told Marissa, in the same quiet voice she'd used for everything important, that she was done fighting something that had already won. Marissa was 17 when her mother died. It was April, and the dogwoods along Walnut Street were blooming, and the cruelty of spring arriving while her mother left was something Marissa would carry for the rest of her life. Linda died in the duplex, in her own bed, with Marissa sitting beside her holding a hand that had become so thin she could feel every bone. The last thing Linda said was not dramatic. It was not a speech or a blessing or a piece of wisdom. She said, "I think the gas bill is due on Friday," and then she closed her eyes, and 20 minutes later, the breathing stopped, and the house was quieter than it had ever been. There was no life insurance. There was no savings account. There was $212 in a coffee can above the refrigerator and a checking account with a balance of $47.83. Linda had been behind on rent by 2 months, a fact she had hidden from Marissa with the same efficiency she'd hidden everything else. The landlord, a man named Gerald Potts, who owned 11 rental properties in Ridgely and managed them all with the warmth of a parking meter, gave Marissa 14 days to vacate. He told her this on the day of the funeral, standing on the front porch in a polo shirt tucked into khakis, his hands in his pockets. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said, "but I've got a waiting list. 14 days. Marissa looked at him and felt something harden inside her chest, a small, dense knot of fury and resolve that would sit there for the next 11 years, pressing against her ribs like a stone she'd swallowed. She was 17. She had no family. Linda had been an only child, and Linda's parents, Marissa's grandparents, had died before she was born. Kevin Cole, wherever he was, might as well have been a character in a book she'd read once and half forgotten. The social worker who came to the duplex 3 days after the funeral was a woman named Diane with reading glasses on a chain and a folder full of papers that represented Marissa's future. Foster care was mentioned, A group home in Martinsburg was mentioned. Marissa sat on the orange carpet and listened to these options the way you listen to someone describing a prison sentence. And when Diane finished, Marissa said, "I'll be 18 in 9 months." Diane looked at her for a long time. She said, "9 months is a long time to be alone." Marissa said, "I've been alone my whole life. I just didn't know it until now." She stayed, not in the duplex, Gerald Potts made sure of that, but in Ridgely, couch surfing with a series of classmates whose parents tolerated her for a few days or a few weeks before the inconvenience outweighed the sympathy. She finished her junior year, carrying everything she owned in a duffel bag her mother had gotten free from a blood drive. She worked 28 hours a week at a gas station on Route 28, making $7.25 an hour, and she saved every dollar she didn't absolutely need for food. She ate one meal a day, usually whatever she could get for under $3, a gas station hot dog, a cup of ramen from the break room microwave, a sleeve of peanut butter crackers. She learned that hunger has a rhythm. The first hour is sharp, almost exciting. The second hour is heavy. By the third hour, your body stops asking and starts waiting, and if you can make it past that, you can make it through anything. She would remember this lesson. She would need it again. She turned 18 in January. She had $1,340 saved. She had a GED. She dropped out in the fall of her senior year, not because she couldn't do the work, but because she couldn't do the work and keep herself alive at the same time, and survival won. She took the GED test at the public library in Cumberland, Maryland, scored in the 94th percentile, and walked out into a parking lot glazed with ice and cried for 11 minutes in the front seat of a car that belonged to the classmate whose family had let her sleep on their couch that month. She cried not because she was sad, but because she was angry. Angry that this test, this scrap of paper, was the ceiling of what she could reach when she should have been applying to colleges, should have been writing essays about her future, should have been sitting in a classroom with people her age talking about things that didn't involve survival. The anger tasted like metal. She swallowed it. She had been swallowing it for a long time. The next 3 years were a blur of movement and work. She left Ridgely because there was nothing left to stay for and everything to remind her of what she'd lost. She moved to Hagerstown, Maryland, 45 minutes east, because a girl she'd worked with at the gas station had a cousin with a room to rent for $300 a month. The room was in the basement of a split-level house that smelled like cat litter and mildew, and the ceiling was so low that Marissa, at 5'4", could touch it with her palm flat. She worked 2 jobs, mornings at a dry cleaner pressing shirts, afternoons and evenings at a chain restaurant bussing tables. She made enough to pay rent, buy food, and put a small amount aside each month. She did not go out. She did not date. She did not drink. Her life was a machine, and she was both the engine and the fuel, and there was nothing left over for anything that didn't serve the machine. She was 21 when she met Ryan Birch. He was 24, broad-shouldered, with sandy hair, and a smile that arrived slowly, like he was deciding whether you deserved it. He drove a delivery truck for a building supply company and came into the restaurant 3 times a week for the lunch special. He was polite to the servers. He tipped well. He said thank you when Marissa refilled his water glass, and he looked at her when he said it, not through her, not past her, but at her, as if she were a person and not a function. It had been so long since someone had looked at her that way that she almost didn't recognize it. But she did. And something inside her, something she'd kept locked in a room she pretended didn't exist, opened a crack. They dated for 7 months. Ryan was kind in the ways that mattered. He showed up when he said he would. He listened when she talked. He didn't push when she went quiet. He was also simple in ways that Marissa, who had been forced into complexity by circumstance, found both comforting and mildly suffocating. He didn't read. He didn't ask questions about the world. He watched sports and worked on his truck and drank beer with his friends on Saturday nights. And his life had the uncomplicated trajectory of someone who had never been hungry, never been homeless, never sat next to a dying parent and listened to them worry about the gas bill. Marissa didn't hold this against him. She envied it. She wanted to climb inside his ordinary life and pull it over her like a blanket. She got pregnant. It was not planned. She was on birth control, the generic kind from the county health clinic, the kind that costs $9 a month and works 91% of the time, which means 9% of the time it doesn't. And Marissa had always been in the unlucky percentages. She told Ryan on a Sunday evening in his apartment, sitting on the edge of his bed, her hands in her lap. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Okay." He said, "We'll figure it out." He said, "I'm not going anywhere." 3 sentences that Marissa held on to like handholds on a cliff face. Lily was born on a Thursday in August, 6 pounds 11 ounces, with her father's sandy hair and her mother's dark eyes. Marissa looked at her in the hospital bed and felt something she had not felt since before her mother got sick. A completeness, a sense that the world had given her something without taking something else away first. She held Lily against her chest and made a promise that she didn't say out loud because she didn't need to. It was in her bones. It was the only thing she'd ever been sure of. "I'm going to give you everything. Everything I didn't have. Everything my mother couldn't give me. You will never wonder if you're loved. You will never eat crackers for dinner. You will never sleep on someone else's couch." This child was going to have a life, a real one, with stability and warmth, and someone who showed up for the awards assembly. Ryan kept his word for 14 months. He worked. He came home. He held Lily in the evenings, while Marissa took showers that lasted longer than they should have, because standing under hot water was the only luxury she allowed herself. It wasn't perfect. Ryan didn't understand why Marissa counted every dollar, why she kept a notebook in the kitchen where she tracked every purchase down to the penny, why she bought diapers in bulk when they were on sale and stacked them in the closet like she was preparing for a siege. He called her intense. He said she needed to relax. He didn't know, because she had never told him, not fully, not the raw and ugly version, what it felt like to have nothing, to be nothing, to stand in a gas station at 2 a.m., eating a hot dog that had been on the roller for 9 hours because it was the only thing between you and hunger. She hadn't told him because she was afraid that if she opened that door, everything behind it would come out and she would never get it closed again. When Lily was 14 months old, Ryan left. He didn't leave the way Marissa's father had left, slowly like water evaporating. Ryan left all at once on a Tuesday while Marissa was at work. She came home to an apartment that was half empty. His clothes were gone. His truck was gone. The television was gone. The Xbox was gone. The toolbox from the hall closet was gone. What remained was Marissa's furniture, the secondhand dresser, the crib, the kitchen table with the wobbling leg, and a note on the counter written in Ryan's blocky handwriting. It said, "I can't do this. I'm sorry. I need to figure some things out." He'd signed it with just his first name, as if they were acquaintances, as if they hadn't made a child together, as if the formality of a signature was all that was required to dissolve a family. Marissa stood in the kitchen holding the note for a long time. Lily was at the babysitter's, a retired woman named Patrice who charged $25 a day and lived in the apartment downstairs. The apartment was very quiet. Marissa could hear the refrigerator humming. She could hear traffic on the street outside. She could hear, if she listened hard enough, the sound of her life collapsing for the second time, and this time she had a child. This time there was someone who depended on her, and the luxury of falling apart was not available. She put the note in a drawer. She picked up Lily from Patrice's. She made dinner, mac and cheese from a box, the 89-cent kind. She gave Lily a bath. She read Lily a story. She put Lily in the crib. She sat on the edge of her bed in the room that was now too big for one person and too empty for two, and she did not cry. She had cried when her mother died. She had cried when she got her GED. She was done crying about things she couldn't change. What she felt was not grief. It was a cold, clear recognition that she was back where she started, alone, with nothing, responsible for everything. And this time, she had to do it carrying a 14-month-old who didn't know that her father had decided he couldn't do this. Ryan never came back. He sent $200 in the mail 2 months later with no note. He sent another $200 3 months after that. Then nothing. Marissa could have pursued child support. She could have gone to court, filed paperwork, forced the system to make him pay. But pursuing child support meant finding Ryan, and finding Ryan meant admitting she needed him. And Marissa had learned from her mother that the worst thing you could do was need someone who had already shown you they weren't reliable. So she let him go the way her mother had let Kevin go. Quietly, completely, with a door closed so firmly it might as well have been bricked over. She was 23, single, with a daughter, a GED, $940 in savings, and rent due in 11 days. The machine started again. The next 4 years were the hardest of Marissa's life, and Marissa's life had not been easy. She needed a job that paid enough to cover rent, childcare, food, utilities, and the slow accumulation of things a child needs as she grows. Shoes every 4 months, a winter coat every year, the prescription for the ear infections Lily got 3 times before she was 3. She needed a job with regular hours so she could pick Lily up from Patrice's by 6 p.m. She needed a job that wouldn't fire her when Lily got sick and she had to stay home. She found work as an administrative assistant at a company called Greenvale Property Management in Hagerstown. It was a small firm, 12 employees, 3 leasing agents, a property manager named Sandra who ran the office with the brisk competence of a woman who had been underestimated her entire career, and the owner, a man named Thomas Avery, who came in 3 days a week, signed checks, attended meetings, and treated the office with the benign neglect of someone who had inherited a business he didn't fully understand. The pay was $14.50 an hour, 40 hours a week, no overtime. Before taxes, that was $2,320 a month. After taxes, roughly $1,856. Marissa sat down at the kitchen table her first week and did the math the way she always did the math, with a pencil, a notebook, and the unflinching honesty of someone who cannot afford to lie to herself. Rent, $785. Patrice's childcare, $500 a month, reduced from $550 because Patrice loved Lily and had quietly lowered the rate without being asked. Utilities, $140 average. Car insurance on the 2007 Honda Civic she'd bought for $3,200 cash, $89. Gas, $120. Phone, $45, the cheapest prepaid plan she could find. That left $177 a month. $177 for food, for diapers, for medicine, for clothes, for every unexpected thing that life throws at a single mother living without a net. She did the math again. She did it 3 times, changing nothing, hoping the numbers would rearrange themselves into something livable. They didn't. Numbers don't lie. They sit on the page and stare at you with the indifference of a landlord on the day of a funeral, and they tell you exactly what is true. So Marissa made a decision. She made it calmly, practically, the way her mother had made every decision, not with drama, but with the quiet calculation of someone triaging their own life. Lily would eat 3 meals a day. Lily would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Lily would have yogurt and fruit and milk and the chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs that she loved, and she would have vegetables even when she threw them on the floor, and she would have snacks in her bag when she went to Patrice's. Lily would not be hungry. This was not negotiable. This was the line that could not be crossed. Marissa would eat once a day, 1 meal, usually dinner, after Lily was in bed, so that Lily would never see her mother not eating. The meal was whatever was cheapest and most filling. Rice and beans, made in a batch on Sunday that lasted until Thursday. A can of soup, a sleeve of crackers with peanut butter. On good weeks, when she found a sale, she'd buy a whole chicken for $5.99 and stretch it across 4 days. Roasted the first night, soup the second, the bones boiled for broth the third, the broth with noodles the fourth. She ate standing at the counter. She ate quickly, mechanically, the way you do when food has stopped being pleasure and become fuel. She drank water constantly, glass after glass. Because water fills the stomach and tricks the body into thinking it's been fed. And Marissa had learned this trick at 17 and never forgotten it. At work, she drank coffee. Black, no sugar, from the pot in the break room that everyone shared. Coffee kills appetite. It also causes your hands to shake when you drink too much of it on an empty stomach, and Marissa learned to grip her pen tighter during meetings so no one would notice. She kept crackers in her desk, not to eat at work. Eating at work meant eating in front of people, and eating in front of people meant they might notice that what she was eating wasn't a meal, but a calculation. The crackers were for emergencies, for the days when the dizziness got bad enough that she couldn't read the numbers on her computer screen, when the edges of her vision went soft and gray, when she had to grip the edge of her desk and breathe through her nose and wait for the room to stop tilting. On those days, she would eat 3 crackers, slowly, in the bathroom, with the stall door locked. She lost weight she didn't have to lose. In 6 months, she went from 118 pounds to 97. Her clothes hung on her. Her cheekbones became prominent in a way that people complimented. "You look great. Have you been working out?" Because American culture has a specific blindness to thinness in women, a willingness to admire what is actually deterioration. Her hair thinned. Her nails became brittle and split at the edges. She bruised easily. A fingerprint-sized mark on her arm from leaning against a filing cabinet. A dark smudge on her shin from bumping a coffee table. She was cold all the time, even in summer, layering cardigans over her blouse, keeping a blanket in the car. Her body was consuming itself, slowly, quietly, efficiently, because that is what bodies do when there is not enough coming in. They eat themselves, starting with fat, then muscle, then the reserves that protect organs and bones, and the fragile machinery of being alive. But she showed up, every day. She arrived at 8:15, 15 minutes before her shift, because being early was the only form of control she had. She filed leases, she answered phones, she processed maintenance requests, and scheduled inspections, and reconciled deposit accounts with a precision that Sandra noticed and appreciated, and never once connected to the fact that Marissa's wrists were getting thinner by the week. Marissa was good at her job because Marissa was good at systems, at making order from chaos, at tracking numbers and finding discrepancies, and solving problems that other people hadn't noticed yet. She was the kind of employee who made the office run better simply by being in it, and no one had any idea that she was starving. No one had any idea because Marissa had perfected the art of invisibility. She ate lunch at her desk, or pretended to. She kept a mug beside her computer that she occasionally lifted to her lips, as if drinking soup. But it was empty. She said she'd eaten a big breakfast when someone suggested ordering pizza. She said she was on a diet when someone offered her a donut. She said her stomach was bothering her when the office went out for Sandra's birthday. Excuse after excuse, delivered with a smile that cost her more energy than she could afford. Each lie a brick in the wall she was building between herself and the people around her, because the wall was what kept her standing. If she let someone see, if she let someone know, the wall would come down, and behind the wall was a 28-year-old woman who was so hungry she could feel her heartbeat in her teeth. Lily turned 3, then 4. Lily was beautiful and bright and fierce in the way of children who are loved relentlessly. She spoke in full sentences by 2. She named every bird in the parking lot of their apartment building. She asked questions about everything and accepted no answer that didn't satisfy her. She loved Patrice. She loved the park. She loved the dinosaur nuggets and the bedtime story and the way her mother held her in the mornings, on the couch, before the day started, Marissa's chin resting on the top of Lily's head, breathing in the smell of her shampoo. These were the moments that made the hunger bearable. These were the moments that turned the machine from something grinding and mechanical into something sacred. Every cracker she didn't eat was a dinosaur nugget Lily could have. Every skipped meal was a winter coat, a pair of shoes, a copay at the pediatrician's office. The math was simple. The math was brutal. The math was the only language Marissa had left. Thomas Avery didn't notice Marissa for the first 7 months. He was the kind of owner who moved through his own business like a guest, pleasant, slightly distracted, more interested in the quarterly numbers than the people who produced them. He was 54, divorced, with 2 grown children who lived in other states and called on holidays. He wore button-down shirts with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, drove a pickup truck that was too clean to have ever carried anything heavy, and had the particular loneliness of a man who had succeeded financially and failed at everything else. He wasn't unkind. He simply wasn't paying attention. He started paying attention in March during a staff meeting about a tenant dispute at one of the company's rental properties. Marissa, who usually sat in the back and took notes, spoke up. She had found a discrepancy in the deposit records, a charge that had been applied twice, once by the leasing agent and once by the accounting software, resulting in a $1,200 overcharge that the tenant had been disputing for 3 months. She explained it clearly, quickly, with the specific numbers and dates that proved it was a system error, not fraud. Sandra looked relieved. The leasing agent looked embarrassed. Thomas looked at Marissa and saw her, really saw her, for the first time. He saw a young woman with sharp eyes and protruding collarbones and wrists like a child's and a blazer that hung off her shoulders as if it had been borrowed from someone larger. He saw competence and hunger in the same face, and he didn't yet understand that the hunger was literal. After that meeting, Thomas started noticing things. He noticed that Marissa's lunch break consisted of sitting at her desk with her computer open. He noticed that she never joined the group orders. He noticed that she wore the same 3 outfits in rotation: a black blazer with gray pants, a blue blouse with black pants, a cardigan with a skirt, and that each outfit seemed to fit her less well every week, as if she were shrinking inside her own clothes. He noticed that her hands shook sometimes when she handed him documents. He noticed that she drank coffee constantly, compulsively, the way people drink when they're trying to fill a void that coffee can't reach. He noticed these things the way a man notices a crack in a wall, first as a curiosity, then as a concern, then as something he can't stop looking at. He asked Sandra about her. Sandra said Marissa was the best hire she'd made in 5 years. Reliable, detail-oriented, never complained, never called in sick. Sandra said she was quiet, kept to herself, didn't socialize. Sandra said she thought Marissa had a daughter. Sandra said she seemed fine. The word people use when they haven't looked closely enough. The day Thomas found the crackers was a Thursday in September. He had come to Marissa's desk after hours to look for an invoice that should have been filed in the property folder for a building on Prospect Street. Marissa had gone home at 5 p.m. She always left at exactly 5 p.m., not a minute early, not a minute late, because Patrice expected her by 5:45 and the drive was 22 minutes. Thomas opened the bottom drawer expecting hanging files and instead found the crackers, 43 packets. He stood there looking at them. He picked one up. It was the kind from a fast food restaurant. The cellophane wrapper, the 2 crackers inside, the small print that said, "Not for individual sale." He put it back. He closed the drawer. He went to his office and sat down and stared at the wall for a long time. He thought about the shaking hands. He thought about the oversized blazer. He thought about the lunch breaks spent at the desk with an empty mug. He thought about the $14.50 an hour he was paying her and tried to do the math. Rent, childcare, car, food. And the math didn't work. The math couldn't work. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, something that bypassed his business brain and went straight to the part of him that had once been a father, who paid attention, before the divorce, before the distance, before he stopped being the kind of man who noticed things. He felt ashamed. Not personally, not yet. That would come later. He felt ashamed of the world, of the system, of the particular American cruelty that allows a woman to work 40 hours a week and still not have enough to eat. The next morning, Thomas arrived before Marissa. He was sitting in his office when she came in at 8:15, and he watched her through the glass partition as she settled at her desk, turned on her computer, poured a cup of black coffee, and began working with the focused intensity of someone who doesn't have the energy to waste. He waited until 10 a.m. He called her into his office. She came in carrying a notepad, expecting a task. He closed the door. He asked her to sit down. What followed was the most difficult conversation Thomas Avery had ever initiated, and it was difficult because he didn't know how to say what he needed to say without making her feel small. He was a man who had spent his career managing properties, not people, and the distance between those two things had never felt wider. He started wrong. He said, "I noticed you don't eat lunch." Marissa stiffened. Her face, already thin, went tight, and Thomas could see the wall going up, the same wall she had built brick by brick out of lies about big breakfasts and upset stomachs. She said, "I eat at my desk." He said, "No, you don't." She said nothing. He said, "I found the crackers, Marissa. I wasn't looking for them. I was looking for an invoice, but I found them." She looked at him. Her eyes were steady, but her jaw was tight, and her hands were gripping the arms of the chair with enough pressure to turn her knuckles white. She was deciding, he realized. She was deciding whether to lie again or whether to let the wall come down, and the decision was costing her something visible. A tremor in her lower lip, a brightness in her eyes that she was fighting with everything she had. She said, "I manage fine." He said, "You weigh 97 pounds. You're shaking right now." He said it gently, but he said it because someone had to, because she had been invisible for too long, and the invisibility was killing her. She broke, not loudly, not with sobs or drama. She broke the way a dam breaks when the water has been pressing against it for years, a single crack and then everything. She told him about Linda, about the duplex on Walnut Street, about the cancer that came from the air inside a building where her mother had spent 14 years trying to keep them alive. She told him about Gerald Potts and the 14 days. She told him about the couches and the gas station and the hot dogs on the roller. She told him about Ryan and the note, "I can't do this," and the half-empty apartment and the $177 a month for everything. She told him about the rice and beans, the can of soup, the crackers in the bathroom stall. She told him about the mornings when she couldn't see straight, the evenings when she sat on the kitchen floor after Lily was asleep and pressed her hands against her stomach, as if she could push the hunger away by force. She told him about the dinosaur nuggets and the winter coats and the math that never worked, the math that she did every night anyway, because doing the math was the only thing between her and the void. Thomas sat behind his desk and listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't say things like, "Have you thought about food stamps?" or "Have you tried meal planning?" The kind of suggestions that people offer when they want to feel helpful without actually helping. He listened the way Marissa had needed someone to listen for 11 years, fully, without judgment, without looking away. When she finished, she was not crying. She had gone past crying into a place that was quieter and more frightening, a flatness, a stillness, the calm of someone who has just shown another person the worst thing about their life and is waiting to see if they will be punished for it. Thomas said 3 things. He said, "First, I'm raising your salary." He said, "Second, I'm going to find out what resources are available to you." He said, "Third, you're going to eat lunch today, not tomorrow. Today." He said it with the plain, firm kindness of a man who had suddenly decided to be a different kind of person, and Marissa looked at him and saw something she hadn't seen since her mother died. Someone who was going to do something, not just feel something. He raised her salary that week, not by a token amount. He raised it from $14.50 to $22 an hour, a $15,600 annual increase that he paid for by cutting his own draw from the company. Sandra, when she found out, said nothing critical. Sandra had seen the crackers too by then. Sandra had known longer than she admitted. Thomas connected Marissa with a social worker, a different kind than the one who had come to the duplex when she was 17. This one helped her apply for SNAP benefits, which she should have qualified for years earlier, but had never applied for because applying meant admitting she needed help, and admitting she needed help felt like the first step toward becoming her mother, toward becoming someone whose life was defined by what they lacked rather than what they endured. The social worker also connected her with a child care assistance program that reduced Patrice's cost by 60%, and with a community health center where Marissa could see a doctor, her first checkup in 6 years, who told her she was anemic, vitamin D deficient, had early signs of osteoporosis at the age of 28, and was approximately 21 pounds underweight. The doctor, a woman named Chen, who spoke with the same practical directness as Patrice, said, "You've been malnourished for at least a year. Your body has been in survival mode." She said, "Your hair loss, your bruising, your fatigue. This is your body eating itself to keep you alive." She said it without drama, the way you state a fact, but the fact landed in Marissa's chest like a stone dropped into deep water, sending ripples out in every direction. She had known, of course. She had known every morning when she looked in the mirror and saw the bones of her face pressing against the skin like something trying to get out. But knowing and hearing are different things, and hearing it from someone with a white coat and a stethoscope made it real in a way that knowing alone could not. Marissa started eating. It sounds simple, start eating, but it wasn't. After 6 months of 1 meal a day, her stomach had shrunk to the size of a child's fist, and eating more than a few bites at a time made her nauseous. Her body, which had adapted to starvation with the ruthless efficiency of a machine designed to survive, did not trust the sudden availability of food. She had to rebuild her relationship with eating the way you rebuild a relationship with a person who has hurt you, slowly, cautiously, with setbacks and frustration, and days when she wanted to skip dinner because skipping dinner felt safe in a way that eating did not. Dr. Chen referred her to a nutritionist who created a plan: small meals, 6 times a day, heavy on protein and iron, supplemented with vitamins that Marissa picked up from the pharmacy with the bewildered gratitude of someone receiving a gift they hadn't known to ask for. Thomas did something else, something that Marissa didn't know about until months later. He called his lawyer and asked about the packaging plant in West Virginia, the one where Linda Cole had worked for 14 years, the one with the ventilation systems from 1967, the one that had put the particulate matter into her lungs that turned into the cancer that killed her. He asked his lawyer to look into it. The lawyer looked into it and found that the plant had been cited by OSHA 3 times between 2001 and 2009 for inadequate ventilation and chemical exposure, and that each time the owner had paid a fine, $4,500, $7,200, $12,000, and changed nothing. He found that 7 former employees had developed respiratory illnesses. He found that 2 had died. One of them was Linda Cole. Thomas brought this information to Marissa on a Tuesday afternoon. She was in the break room, eating a turkey sandwich, her second meal of the day, and he sat down across from her and slid a folder across the table. She opened it. She read it. She read the OSHA citations, and the fine amounts and the names of the other sick workers, and the name of the plant owner, a man named Charles Prescott, who had inherited the plant from his father and ran it from an office in Pittsburgh, 200 miles from the air his employees breathed. She read it all, and then she closed the folder and looked at Thomas and said, "My mother died because of a $4,500 fine." Thomas said, "Yes." She said, "And nobody did anything." He said, "Not yet." But the universe wasn't done with Marissa, not even close. The lawyer Thomas had contacted referred Marissa to a firm in Charleston that specialized in occupational exposure cases. The lead attorney, a woman named Grace Holloway, took the case on contingency after a 45-minute phone call during which Marissa told her story, with the same flat, precise clarity she had used with Thomas. Grace said, "This is a strong case." She said, "This might take years." She said, "Are you prepared for that?" Marissa said, "I've been preparing for this my whole life. I just didn't know it." The case took 2 years and 3 months. During that time, Marissa's life changed in increments so gradual they were almost invisible until she looked back and realized she was living in a different world. She gained weight, slowly, painfully, fighting her body's distrust of abundance. She reached 110 pounds by the end of the first year. Her hair thickened, her bruises healed. The fatigue retreated from a constant roar to an occasional whisper. She got a raise, her second, to $26 an hour, because Thomas had restructured the company's pay scale after realizing that Marissa was not the only person in his office who was underpaid, just the only one who was dying from it. She moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a balcony and a dishwasher and a window in Lily's room that faced east, so the morning light came in and landed on Lily's bed like a gift. Lily started kindergarten. Marissa was there for the first day, standing at the classroom door with the other parents, holding a phone she'd upgraded to one with a camera, taking pictures she would look at later that night on the couch with tears running down her face. Not sad tears, not hungry tears. The kind of tears that come when you realize you have kept a promise you made to yourself in a half-empty apartment on the worst night of your life. Lily was wearing new shoes. Lily had a backpack with a working zipper. Lily had a lunchbox with a turkey sandwich, an apple, a juice box, and a note that said, "I love you" in Marissa's handwriting, tucked beside the napkin where Lily would find it. These are small things. They are small things that feel enormous when you know what they cost. The lawsuit settled. Charles Prescott's insurance company, after 2 years of discovery and depositions and motions to dismiss that Grace Holloway dismantled with the precision of a surgeon, offered $340,000. Grace said they could push for more at trial. Marissa said no. She said, "I don't want more time in a courtroom talking about my mother's lungs." She said, "I want this to be done." Grace understood. The settlement, after legal fees, netted Marissa $221,000. Marissa sat with that number for a week. She sat with it the way she sat with every number, carefully, honestly, without fantasy. She put $50,000 in a college fund for Lily. She put $80,000 in a savings account she would not touch. She paid off her car. She paid 6 months of rent in advance. She bought herself a winter coat, a real one, not from a donation bin, not from a clearance rack, but a coat she chose because she liked the color, because it was warm, because it fit her body the way it was now, not the way it had been. She stood in the store trying it on and caught her reflection in the mirror and did not recognize herself. Not because she looked different, though she did, because she looked like someone who was allowed to have things, and that was new. She went back to Ridgely once. She drove the 45 minutes from Hagerstown on a Saturday in October when the hills were on fire with color, the maples turning shades of red and orange that looked deliberate, as if someone had painted them. She drove down Route 28 past the gas station where she'd worked at 17. It was still there, the same fluorescent lights, the same roller grill visible through the window. She didn't stop. She drove past the Methodist church where her mother's funeral had been held, in a room that smelled like coffee and floor wax, where 11 people had come, and 3 of them were staff. She drove down Walnut Street. The duplex was still there. The wood paneling was visible through the front window. The backyard was still the size of a parking space, but the orange carpet was gone. She could see through the window that the floor was bare concrete now, and the walls had been painted white, and a child's bicycle was leaned against the porch railing. Someone else lived there. Someone else's life was happening in the rooms where her mother had coughed blood into a dish towel and worried about the gas bill. She sat in her car for 20 minutes. She did not get out. She looked at the duplex and waited to feel something. Anger, grief, nostalgia, the hot tightness in her chest that had been her companion for so many years. What she felt instead was something quieter. Not peace exactly, not closure, something more like acknowledgement. This happened. This place existed. The girl who lived here survived. She survived on hot dogs and crackers and stubbornness, and she is sitting in a car that is paid off, wearing a coat she chose, going home to a daughter who has never been hungry. That was not enough to erase what had happened. Nothing would be enough for that. But it was something. It was the beginning of something. Thomas Avery and Marissa Cole remained close. Not romantically. The gap between them was too wide and too complicated for that, and neither of them needed it. But Thomas became something Marissa had never had. A person who showed up consistently, without being asked, without keeping score. He came to Lily's school play. He helped Marissa move into her new apartment, carrying boxes up 2 flights of stairs with the awkward determination of a man who had spent too many years carrying nothing. He sent Lily birthday presents. Books, always books, because Marissa had told him once that she'd loved reading as a child and never had enough to read. He gave Marissa a raise every year, and when she told him she wanted to go back to school, to get a real degree, to become the person she would have been if the world hadn't intervened, he restructured her schedule so she could take classes in the evenings. She enrolled at the community college in Hagerstown when Lily was 6. She took 2 classes per semester, all she could manage with work and Lily and the bone-deep exhaustion that still visited her on bad days, the body's memory of what it had been through. She studied at the kitchen table the way she had studied as a child, in the quiet of a house where everyone else was asleep. She wrote papers about things she cared about: labor law, workplace safety, the particular vulnerability of women in low-wage employment. Her professors noticed her the way her childhood teachers had noticed her, with quiet respect for a mind that worked harder than it should have had to. She made the dean's list her first semester. She made it every semester after that. She graduated with an associate's degree in business administration 3 years later, at the age of 31, in a ceremony she attended with Lily on one side and Thomas on the other, and Patrice sitting 3 rows back, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. But the moment that mattered most, the moment that Marissa would carry with her longer than the settlement check or the diploma or the coat she bought herself, happened on an ordinary Wednesday evening when Lily was 7. They were eating dinner. Actual dinner, chicken, green beans, rice, the kind of meal that fills a table in a kitchen with warmth and steam, and the particular noise of 2 people sharing food. Lily was talking about a project at school, something about butterflies and metamorphosis, and the way caterpillars dissolve inside the chrysalis before they become something new. She said it casually, the way children say extraordinary things, as if the transformation of one creature into another were as unremarkable as tying your shoes. "Mama," she said, "did you know that when the caterpillar is inside, it turns into soup? Like, all of it. It's not a caterpillar anymore, and it's not a butterfly yet. It's just soup. And then it becomes the butterfly." Marissa put down her fork. She looked at her daughter, this small, fierce, impossibly beautiful person who had dinosaur nuggets and winter coats and a lunchbox with notes inside. And she said, "I know, baby. I know about the soup." Lily looked at her, puzzled by the weight in her mother's voice, and said, "Are you okay, Mama?" And Marissa smiled. Not a big smile, not a performance, the kind of smile that starts in a place deeper than your face and takes a long time to reach the surface. She said, "Yeah, baby, I'm okay. I'm finally okay." She was not perfect. Her life was not perfect. She still counted every dollar. She still kept a notebook in the kitchen. She still woke up some nights with her heart pounding, dreaming she was back in the apartment with the half-empty rooms and the note on the counter, dreaming she was back in the gas station at 2 a.m., reaching for a hot dog that had been on the roller for 9 hours. The body remembers. The body keeps a ledger of every hunger and every fear, and every night spent on the kitchen floor with hands pressed against a stomach that had nothing in it, and that ledger doesn't close just because the checking account has a balance and the refrigerator is full. Healing is not a destination. It is a direction. You walk toward it every day, and some days you make progress, and some days you stand still, and some days you go backward, and the only thing that matters is that you keep walking. Marissa kept walking. She walked toward the degree and the raise and the apartment with the balcony. She walked toward the moments at the dinner table and the mornings on the couch with Lily's head under her chin. She walked toward the kind of life her mother had wanted for her but couldn't give her, not because Linda didn't love her enough, but because the world Linda lived in did not love either of them at all, and one woman's love, no matter how fierce, cannot compensate for an entire system's indifference. Thomas Avery retired 3 years after Marissa graduated. He sold the company to a property management firm based in Frederick, and part of the sale agreement, a clause he insisted on, the only thing he fought for in the negotiation, was that Marissa Cole would be retained at her current salary with an annual review and a path to a management position. The new owners, who had reviewed her performance records and seen the 6 years of flawless work and the systems she'd built and the money she'd saved the company, agreed without argument. She became an assistant property manager at 32 and a full property manager at 34, overseeing 12 residential buildings, 280 units, and a team of 4 people who reported to her. She was the kind of manager who noticed things. She noticed when an employee came in looking tired. She noticed when someone wore the same clothes 3 days in a row. She noticed when someone said they'd eaten a big breakfast. She noticed because she knew what those things meant, and she knew that the space between fine and not fine is measured in crackers hidden in a desk drawer. She kept snacks in her office, not for herself, though she ate them too now, for anyone who needed them. Granola bars, peanut butter packets, trail mix, the small mercies that cost almost nothing and mean almost everything. If you're listening to this right now, I want you to sit with something for a moment. Marissa Cole worked a full-time job for 11 months while starving. She was visible every day, at her desk, on the phone, in meetings, in the break room drinking coffee from an empty mug. She was surrounded by people, and not one of them saw her. Not one of them asked the question that Thomas Avery finally asked, not because they were cruel, but because they were busy, because they were distracted, because it is easier to believe someone is fine than to find out they aren't. It took a man opening the wrong drawer on a Thursday evening to uncover a truth that had been sitting in plain sight for almost a year. 43 packets of crackers, the evidence of a woman keeping herself alive on almost nothing so that her daughter could have everything. The question is not why didn't anyone see? The question is, are you seeing now? Because there is a Marissa in your office, in your neighborhood, in the chair next to you at the PTA meeting, in the car next to you at the drive-thru. There is someone right now who is calculating whether they can afford to eat today so that someone they love can eat instead. And they are fine. They will tell you they are fine. They will smile and say they had a big breakfast and their stomach is bothering them and they're on a new diet. And you will believe them because believing is easier than seeing. See them. Ask the question. Open the drawer. You might find crackers. You might find something worse. But you might also find the beginning of a story that doesn't have to end the way it started. A story about a woman who was soup, who dissolved inside the chrysalis of her own suffering, who lost everything and ate nothing and kept walking anyway, and who became, in the end, not despite what she endured, but through it, something with wings.